Friends, I am glad to welcome you to my channel, Psycharia. Today, we are going to break down a situation that breaks even the most resilient and confident men. We will talk about a relationship scenario that begins like a Hollywood romance movie but ends like a psychological thriller, where you constantly feel guilty but don't understand exactly why. You know this scenario. Perhaps you are living in it right now. It all begins with incredible intensity. You meet her, and the world seems to stop. It wasn't just attraction, it was some kind of incredible gravity. She looks at you as if you are the only man on the planet capable of understanding her. She is open, she is vulnerable, she trusts you with her secrets on the second date. You feel like a hero. You feel needed. You think, finally, this is the woman who will appreciate my care, my reliability, my love. But time passes 3 months, 6 months, and the atmosphere changes. The air in the house becomes heavy. The woman who looked at you with adoration now looks with a squint full of suspicion. Your attempts to do something nice are met with criticism. Quiet evenings suddenly explode into scandals, the cause of which is unclear to you. You begin to walk on tiptoes in your own home, weighing every word, afraid to provoke another conflict. And you ask yourself the question that drives you crazy. What did I break? Where did I go wrong? Why does it get worse the harder I try? I am here to tell you the truth that is often silenced for fear of appearing insensitive. You didn't break anything. You have encountered a force that was set in motion long before your arrival. You have entered into a relationship with a woman who has a deep, unprocessed father wound. And this trauma has its own hidden program. This program does not seek happiness or peace. It seeks confirmation of its worst fears. It will test you, push you to the edge, provoke you, and reject you until you either break and confirm that all men are the same, or find the strength to walk away. You have found yourself inside a complex script where your sincere love is perceived not as a gift, but as a danger that will inevitably be followed by pain. She is unconsciously trying to relive the difficult history of her childhood, casting you in a role you did not choose and from a script you never read. Today, we will take a deep dive into this dynamic. We will break down the psychological mechanics of this process so that you stop blaming yourself and understand what you are actually dealing with. First, the anatomy of the father wound, programming chaos. To understand the present, we need to look into the past, because what is happening between you and her today is an echo of events from 20 years ago. Father wound is a term describing the emotional deficit formed in childhood due to the relationship with the primary male figure, because the father is the first man in a girl's life, creating the template and teaching her what love is, what trust is, and what to expect from the male gender. If this template was broken, the entire structure of perceiving relationships becomes skewed. Imagine a girl whose father was physically present but emotionally absent. He might have been a workaholic who noticed her only for excellent grades, or an addicted person whose mood changed from euphoria to rage in a second, or he might have simply left, leaving her with the question, why wasn't I good enough for him to stay? In these moments, she learns to suppress her true emotions, believing that showing vulnerability will only lead to a new portion of rejection. In such an environment, a child internalizes several destructive lessons that become her operating system in adult life. She believes that love is unreliable because loved ones cause pain or disappear, and that calm is a trap foreshadowing thunder, so one must always be on high alert. She gets used to the idea that attention must be fought for, earned, or provoked, and that men are dangerous because even behind a mask of kindness lies inevitable betrayal. She is completely unaware of these beliefs, and if you ask her, she will sincerely say that she wants a strong family and a reliable husband. But her subconscious is rigidly programmed for survival in conditions of emotional deficit, and when she meets you, this hidden code begins to work against you. Your closeness is perceived by her psyche not as a long-awaited haven, but as an alarm signal, forcing her to unconsciously destroy what she so consciously strives for. Second, why your reliability scares her. the paradox of stability. This is where the most interesting and painful part to understand begins. Because logic suggests, if she suffered from an unreliable father, she should value a reliable man, right? You are that Michael who always picks up the phone, is never late, and plans the weekends, acting as a living antidote to her past. But the human psyche works by different laws. We do not seek what is useful for us. We seek what is familiar, and our brain gravitates toward familiar scenarios simply because it knows how to survive in them. For a woman with such trauma, the familiar environment is chaos, and her norm consists of a feeling of anxiety, uncertainty, and the need to struggle for crumbs of attention. Therefore, when you give her stability, peace, and unconditional care, her nervous system does not relax. On the contrary, it enters a state of high alert, because for her, your stability feels like a signal that something is wrong here. She unconsciously thinks, too quiet, too good, that's impossible, which means where is the catch? When will he hit me? Or when will he leave? Your reliability does not soothe her fears. It triggers them, and she feels like a person who has lived on a volcano all their life and is suddenly moved to a quiet house in the village where they cannot sleep because of the deafening silence. She becomes physically uncomfortable from the absence of the habitual adrenaline that always accompanied any significant relationships for her in the past. She needs a shake-up to feel alive, and since the tension of waiting for the catch becomes unbearable, she does what looks like madness from the outside. She creates the catch herself. In her internal distorted logic, it is safer to initiate a disaster herself right now and control this process than to live in exhausting anticipation of an inevitable blow from the outside that might catch her by surprise. She provokes a conflict, finds a reason for drama, and single-handedly destroys the peace to return to the familiar state of chaos where she knows the rules of the game. Thus, she unconsciously turns your safe relationship into a disaster zone, confirming her tragic worldview, even if deep down she desperately wants to be happy. Third, the cycle of chaos. Conflict as a drug. You have probably noticed this exhausting cycle. Everything is going just fine. You feel deep closeness, and suddenly, bam, a grand scandal out of nowhere. The reason can be absolutely anything. You looked the wrong way, said the wrong phrase, or simply forgot to buy milk. But her reaction turns out to be completely disproportionate to this insignificant cause. This happens because for a woman with unprocessed internal pain, conflict is not a way to solve a problem, but the only available tool for emotional regulation. When closeness becomes too intense, it scares her to her core, because in her map of the world, closeness means vulnerability, and vulnerability inevitably carries the risk of unbearable pain. Her internal security system begins to sound the alarm, perceiving your spiritual warmth as a threatening invasion from which she must immediately defend herself before it is too late. Her anxiety goes off the scale, and to release this unbearable tension, she vitally needs an explosion. A quarrel for her is an effective way to push you to a safe distance, blow off steam, and, paradoxically, feel a distorted but strong connection. At this moment, through your anger or upset, she receives confirmation of her existence and significance, because for her, a furious scream is better than silence frightening in its unknown. In childhood, she might have received her father's attention only through negative things when she was sick, crying, or when he was shouting, so her brain firmly links intense negative emotions with the manifestation of love. If we are shouting at each other, it means we care, and if there is drama, it means there is passion. Calm, healthy love feels like cold indifference to her, and if you just sit nearby and read a book, it seems to her that you have stopped loving her. She needs emotional swings from euphoria to despair to feel that the relationship is alive, otherwise she begins to suffocate in the vacuum of stability. You, at this moment, feel absolutely exhausted because you are trying to build a reliable house, and she is constantly arranging earthquakes to check the strength of the foundation. As a result, you find yourself in the role of an architect trying to build walls in the middle of a raging hurricane, not realizing that the mechanism of destruction is embedded in the very project of this relationship. Fourth, reality testing. Will you leave like he did? The main question that sounds like an obsessive echo in her head 24/7 is, will you leave me too? But she never asks it in words, preferring to ask it through her complex and contradictory behavior. She arranges endless checks for you. She pushes you away to see if you will chase her, and behaves unbearably, trying to find exactly where the limit of your patience lies. She may say hurtful things not so much to offend, but to see if you are capable of withstanding the weight of her internal pain and staying close. Behind this lies the distorted logic of trauma. If I show him the darkest, worst version of myself, and he doesn't turn away, it means he truly loves me. The problem is that this exam has no final grade, and if you pass the first test with honor, her anxious subconscious will immediately invent a second, more sophisticated one, and a third will inevitably follow. Why does this happen? Because she fundamentally does not believe in a positive result, and even if you stayed today, her fear treacherously whispers, "But what if he leaves tomorrow? I need to check again to make sure for certain." It resembles an attempt to fill a bottomless vessel. You cannot prove your reliability to her once and for all, because the root of the problem lies not in your actions, but in her deep internal inability to believe that safety exists at all. She is unconsciously trying to recreate and rewrite the script of her childhood, but with a different ending. She chooses a man, projects the figure of her father onto him, and tries to force him to give that unconditional love she lacked so much in the past. Instead of building a real relationship with you here and now, she tries to win an old argument with the shadows of the past, using you as a tool for this hopeless attempt. But the tragic paradox is that by her behavior, she often achieves the exact outcome she fears most. The man, no matter how loving he is, gets tired of the endless tests and actually leaves to preserve himself. His departure becomes for her not a consequence of her actions, but merely another proof of the unreliability of the world, which she herself provoked. And then she bitterly says, "I knew it. All men are the same," and the grim prophecy comes true. This finale closes the vicious circle, strengthening her protective barriers and depriving her of the opportunity to see that a different, happy scenario was possible if she had risked trusting without checks. Fifth, the trap for the nice guy. Why do men stay in such relationships, and why are you still there? Most likely, you are driven by the savior syndrome, forcing you to see in her not an adult woman, but a little, traumatized girl whose pain you desperately want to soothe. You convince yourself, "I can heal her. My love is enough for two, and I will become the only one who proves to her the safety of this world, because I am not like her exes or her father." This seems like a noble impulse, but in reality, it is a trap of codependency, where you feel strong and significant only in the process of saving, and her chaos gives you a sense of mission for which you are willing to pay with your own dignity. But you must accept one cruel truth. You cannot heal her with your love, because you are not a psychotherapist, not her father, and not God. Trauma is a deeply internal problem, the solution to which can only come from within, and your attempts to save often turn you into a simple emotional buffer, allowing her not to face reality. As long as you obediently pass her tests and run after her every time she pushes you away, you are not helping her, but only feeding her trauma, confirming the effectiveness of such interaction. You teach her that one can behave destructively and still receive love, thereby depriving her of the incentive for real change. In fact, by protecting her from the consequences of her own actions, you become an unwitting accomplice in the destruction, blocking the only opportunity for her to grow up and take responsibility for her life. Your infinite patience becomes a soft wall that separates her from the necessary crisis, without which true healing and growth are simply impossible. Sixth, boundaries as the moment of truth. Do you want to know if this relationship has a real future? Try setting a firm, personal boundary. A woman with a deep father wound often does not understand the concept of healthy distance, perceiving any separation as total rejection, because in her childhood experience there were only two extremes, either total enmeshment or cold ignoring. Therefore, when you calmly and confidently say, "I will not continue the conversation in this tone," or "I need time for myself," she perceives this not as a request for mutual respect, but as a direct threat to your connection. In these words, she hears not your natural desire to preserve yourself, but a frightening message: "I don't love you and I'm going to leave," which instantly triggers a violent defensive reaction. A variety of influence tools may be used, from imposing guilt with phrases like, "If you loved me, you wouldn't do this," to gaslighting, convincing you of your own suspiciousness, or even direct threats to find someone who truly understands her. She can masterfully step into the role of a victim, claiming that you are only finishing her off in a difficult moment, and this becomes the critical point of testing the viability of your union. At this moment, she is unconsciously testing how strong your attachment is and whether you are ready to sacrifice your comfort for the sake of her emotional peace, turning an ordinary dialogue into a tough loyalty test. How she reacts to your firm no says much more about her capacity for adult relationships than any beautiful declarations of love. If she, even if not immediately, is able to accept your autonomy and respect it, then there really is hope for a healthy future. However, if she systematically demolishes your barriers, punishes you for trying to be yourself, and demands complete dissolution in each other, this is a huge alarm signal that cannot be ignored. Such behavior unambiguously indicates that she perceives you not as a separate individual with your own needs, but as a functional addition to her psyche, designed to drown out her deep fear of loneliness. This is a sure sign that she is looking not for an equal partner, but for a parental figure who will service her anxiety around the clock. In such conditions, building a harmonious union becomes impossible, since true closeness requires the presence of two whole people, not one person, and their silent shadow. Seventh, intimacy as currency and a band-aid. Another indicative symptom of this dynamic is her specific attitude towards physical closeness and intimate moments. A girl who received insufficient love in childhood often learns to gain attention through her attractiveness, early on absorbing the mindset, "They might not listen to me, but they definitely look at me." In adult relationships, this results in her using physical interaction as a way to receive validation, confirmation of her own significance, rather than as a language for expressing deep love. You may notice that passion in your couple goes off the scale precisely after conflicts, manifesting in the form of stormy reconciliation intimacy. You argued. The problem remained unsolved. You feel a chasm between you, and suddenly, a burst of emotions and tactility. It seems to you, "Oh, we made up. Everything is fine," but this is a dangerous illusion, since closeness here works only as a powerful emotional painkiller. It allows her to bypass the hard work of verbal communication and mutual understanding, substituting it with a physical act that imitates connection but lacks the depth necessary for true healing. This relieves tension and gives her a temporary feeling that you want her, and therefore won't leave, but it does not solve the problem, being merely a band-aid on a deep fracture. As a result, the unresolved conflict continues to smolder beneath the surface of this temporary relief, inevitably surfacing with renewed vigor when the chemical intoxication subsides. 3 days later, the exact same problem returns because you didn't talk and didn't agree, but simply covered the situation with emotions. Furthermore, she may use the refusal of intimacy as a sophisticated punishment. If you didn't pass the test or weren't a good boy, access to the body and warmth is cut off. This turns intimacy from a sacred space of mutual vulnerability into a cold tool of manipulation and control, which destroys trust at the root and turns your connection into an endless marketplace of bargaining. Eighth, the path to healing, if it exists. Is it possible to fix this? And is it realistic to build a strong family with such a woman? The answer is complex and ambiguous. Yes, but, and this but is huge, since happy relationships are possible only with the strict observance of three conditions, none of which, unfortunately, depends on you. First, complete awareness of the problem is necessary. She must acknowledge that the root of the difficulties lies in her reactions, not in you or abstract men seeing her destructive pattern of behavior, because without this insight, any attempts are doomed, and if she continues to blame you for everything, the game is over. Second, real, tangible actions are needed. Since understanding alone is not enough, this means therapy, studying psychology, and deep work on herself. If she limits herself to promises to try but ignores specialists, this is self-deception, because trauma of this level is not treated by willpower, but requires professional help to rewire neural connections. Without qualified outside intervention, she risks endlessly walking in a closed circle of the same defense mechanisms, sincerely not understanding why her independent efforts do not bring long-term results. Third, the ability to withstand discomfort is critically important, because healing is a painful process requiring learning to live in unusual calm without destroying it, and asking directly rather than manipulating, boldly facing inner emptiness without demanding that you fill it at your expense. Your role in this equation is to be a reliable partner, not an omnipotent savior, supporting her on this path but not doing the inner work for her. So the best thing you can do for both of you is to stop playing her destructive games. Stop running after her when she demonstratively runs away, apologizing for things you didn't do, and accepting tantrums as the norm. Instead, hold your boundaries and be an unshakable rock. Your principled firmness will become the mirror in which she finally sees reality, because when you stop emotionally servicing her chaos, she loses the opportunity to run away from responsibility for her actions. If she is truly ready for growth, she, encountering your firmness, will understand the inefficiency of old methods and begin to change. And if not, she will leave to look for a more pliable victim who can be controlled, and in this case, such an outcome will become your true salvation. I know how hard this is. You love her. You see her potential. You remember those moments when she was tender and loving, and you hold on to this image, hoping that it will return forever. But you must look the truth in the eye. Potential is not reality. Reality is how you feel in this relationship every day. Do you feel filled or drained? Do you feel loved or constantly evaluated? Do not let your life turn into an endless attempt to prove to someone that you are worthy of trust. You are worthy, and a healthy woman will see this without endless tests and checks. Sometimes the greatest act of love is to walk away. Walk away to preserve yourself. Walk away to give her a chance to face her demons alone, because only then can she defeat them. Do not sacrifice your mental health for the sake of someone else's unresolved history. You are the main character of your life, not a supporting character in her drama. Think about this tonight when the silence comes again. What does this silence tell you? Thank you for being with us. If this video opened your eyes, if you recognized your story in it, like it and share it. Perhaps it will save someone's time and nerves. Subscribe to the Psycharia channel. We will continue to dissect the complex mechanisms of the human soul. Take care of yourself, be strong, and see you soon.